Okay, so you got an assignment. You see it on the board right there. I haven't given y'all an easy grade in a while, so we're gonna do a little research project. It's gonna be due on Wednesday. Just take a sheet of paper, divide it up into 4 quadrants, and what I want you to do is to research a developmental disorder. So we're gonna get into development today and tomorrow, like how the baby develops in utero, and so whatever, I want you to do the symptoms of that disorder. So like, how does it manifest itself? What does it look like? When, like what stages is this happening during development? Where, like what body parts, like what's the location of the body parts that it's affecting? And then how does it cause those changes? So what's the pathology of that? So what does it actually do that causes those changes in that organism? So there's a ton of different disorders you could look up and do, but you'll just do that, turn it in. It'll be easy, 40-point grade. I don't care if you bullet points on this. I would say probably have at least 4 or 5 good bulleted points in discussion. And so we can thoroughly understand whatever that developmental disorder is. So make sure that you get that done by Wednesday. Thursday will be your test. Wednesday will be mostly a review day. I think we've got a couple of FRQs that we're going to work on that day. And then we'll review a little bit. And then, like I say, test on Thursday. And then we're going to Friday and Monday will be kind of a brief intro or review of some just basic genetics from 9th grade. And then next week, you guys will test. Ooh, y'all can test on Wednesday. 5th and 7th on Wednesday, 1st, 3rd, and 6th on, this is 5th period, right? Yeah. 1st, 3rd, and 6th on Thursday, and 2nd and 4th is on Friday. So you guys will test. Probably if you're here on Thursday, we'll watch a movie, and then we're not going to do anything new after that. And then I wouldn't even see anyways on Friday. So that is the layout for the next couple weeks. Any questions? Yummy. Who is Ashlyn okay? Is she quarantined or did she just go remote? Gosh, I need to look.
Well, she tried to come back today, but they wouldn't take her excuse, so she'll be back tomorrow. I was trying to FaceTime her because she wanted to hear the lecture.
Tell her it's on the YouTube. Tell her, yeah, I actually forgot to post the other one Friday, so I'm gonna post both the ones on the last.
Miss Friday.
Last 2. Do what?
What did I miss Friday?
This past Friday?
Yeah.
We went over part 3 male and part of female, the first part of the female reproductive development. So yeah, you need to go back through part 3. And also you missed a data set question. So we'll need to do that at some point. Anyway, all right, let's turn to page 1021. All right, so we started off talking about the female reproductive organs the other day, or ended on the female reproductive organs, and so we're going to start off there today. Real quick kind of review. Where is the egg released from? Ovaries. So you can see the female anatomy here. The ovaries release the follicles, which has the egg in it. It travels down the what? Fallopian tubes or oviducts, whatever you want to call them. And what happens in the oviducts or fallopian tubes? Fertilization if it's going to happen, should happen there. And then if fertilization does take place, then that developing embryo will implant where? In the uterus. Good. So baby will grow in there and develop and eventually will come out. Remember the cervix is the thing that you always hear. What do you hear about it in the like movies? The cervix is what? Dilating, yeah. So usually like full dilation, you'll hear, they'll be like, she's 10 centimeters dilated. And so 10 centimeters is actually about 4 inches. And so that sounds big, but that's not really big when you're talking about, baby's head. Baby's pretty big, especially their head and shoulders and stuff. So coming through there, you know, you can get broken collarbones. My daughter broke her collarbone during birth because you're trying to squeeze through there. You know, the bones of the head, they're still squishy. Fix my hair. They're not sutured together, fused together. So, you know, those bones can squeeze so the baby can fit through there, fit through the birth canal. My son, I'll never forget, when he came out, he looked like one of those aliens off of the Crystal Skull, Indiana Jones. You know what I'm talking about? Where their heads like kind of point straight back. Like, because his head got squished as he's going through there. And I was like, he's never going to be right. But eventually it all worked itself out. You know that there's some cultures, like in different places throughout history, that they would bind their babies' heads to like push it back so that it would like come to a point like that.
Yeah.
The Mongols did something like that too.
Yeah, I think. And then there's a tribe or two in Africa that also did that.
They did it in South America way back then.
Yeah, it's happened throughout the world. It's kind of weird that they looked at that as a, you know, something that they thought was cool, or I don't know why they did it. But anyway, and then some will actually like conehead their kids where it's like straight up, you know, like y'all seen the movie Coneheads? Like someone want their kids to come out looking like that. Whatever, floats your boat, internet, yeah.
I heard that in the Dan Carlson podcast.
Oh, yeah? The Dan Carlin?
Mm-hmm.
The Hardcore History?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the best. That is the best. All right, and then, yeah, you know, like, I think it was the Chinese for years, they were putting plates on the back of their kids' head. They make them sleep with those plates so that they have a flat head. That was desirable. Who knows? Anyway, so, I don't know how we went down that path. So, that's where the baby develops. Ovulation, we're going to get back into that. Let's move back over to the egg. So, let's get a little more detail on the egg, on 1023 here. Now, we're going to contrast sperm and egg development. So, sperm, you start out with one diploid cell, and you end up with how many cells? Two? You end up with 2 sperm? 4 sperm. All right, so you start out with one diploid cell. Now, keep in mind, we're going to get into meiosis, but I'm going to give you the overview here. You start out with one diploid cell that has 46 different chromosomes. Each one of those 46 chromosomes, they're still like the typical kind of X shape where they have 2 sister chromatids. So what you have to do is reduce that chromosomal number down to 23, and then you have to separate those sister chromatids. So that's where the 2 divisions take place, okay? And you wind up with 4 sperm. Now, ladies, you guys are born with all the eggs you're ever going to have, and your book says there's about 1 to 2 million of these in your ovaries. I think the movie, I want to say it said maybe 300,000 or something. I don't know, 500,000. I don't know who's in there counting those things. Let's do this fun little activity right now, though, Sarah. Let's try to figure out how many eggs you're going to release in your lifetime. And boys, y'all can pretend you're girls too. And see if you can figure out how many eggs you're going to release in your lifetime. Go. Write it down. Don't say out the answer. Remember, sperm, when they're released, there's usually about 200 million. Eggs are going to be a little bit different, though. Let's go, Walker. Farrah, how many eggs are you going to release, buddy? I can do this as science. Mason, you got it? Hold on a second. Katie's still trying to figure out her egg count. It's fun, you know, because I count eggs at home, like when we go pick up chicken eggs. Just think of all those little chicken embryos in there waiting to be eaten or grow into a new chicken. Katie, what you got?
I figured out. Okay, so I figured.
I just want a number.
468.
Okay, so most of y'all probably got anywhere from like 350 to 500, somewhere in there, right? Mm-hmm. So you're going to start releasing eggs when? What time? Puberty, which would be about what for a girl? 12, 13, somewhere in there. I mean, I heard of these, I think it was a Romanian gypsy had a kid when she was 10 a few years, maybe 10 years ago. And then it may be 10, it may be a little bit later, depending on developmental cues. And then usually you stop releasing eggs when?
55.
What?
Like 55-ish.
I was thinking probably mid 40s to 50s. I don't know. Some women maybe a little bit later. It just depends on when you hit menopause. I probably should look that up, an average, but I always kind of was under the impression it was mid 40s ish, somewhere in there. Y'all could probably ask your mothers, but that might be a sensitive topic. Who knows? So, hope they're not going through the change. I remember one time I used to be a hateful teenage boy, and I can't remember what I said to my mother. It was smart alecky, I'm sure, but we were in the kitchen, and whatever I said, she slapped me across the face as hard as she could. I've never been slapped that hard. And I thought, it's probably the hormones, but it could have been my hormones, and I could have been acting up. Who knows? I don't know. She smacked the crap out of me. All right. Never will forget that. Let's see here. So, eggs. You're going to release just one egg a month unless what happens? Well, that, yes. What else?
You could release 2, right?
Well, you could release 2. I guess you could release more, but I think that'd be highly unlikely. I think, releasing 1 from each ovary could be, happens pretty often. Releasing more than 1 from an ovary, I think, would be very abnormal. And hence why having more than like twins is very out of normal. So anyway, so you're releasing 1 egg usually per month or for every 28 days from your ovary. So your ovary's kind of taking turns. Which one's releasing an egg? 1 egg for 1 diploid cell that you start out with. How many eggs do you end up with? We're on page 1023. 1. How many sperm did you get?
4.
Why do you only get 1 egg? Where you got 4 sperm?
Because you have to have all that junk in there.
You do have to have all that junk in there, Katie. You got to have all that cytoplasm and things that's needed for the baby to develop. So the egg's basically like ginormous, and the sperm is like super duper small in comparison. Remember, it's only really carrying just a little bit of DNA in there. But the egg has all the cytoplasmic components that are needed. And remember, the egg is just not really, it's 1 cell, but it's big enough where it starts dividing and actually becomes a bunch of cells. I remember how it started dividing. It didn't get any bigger for a while. So it just divided. And so it was still using the same cytoplasm and stuff from that 1 cell. And then, remind me to come back and talk about the person who had 3 parents. But I'll need to talk about that later. So, what happens to that dextra DNA then? How does the egg get rid of those other chromosomes that it doesn't need? Good question. So, ladies, when you hit puberty, if you look on 1023 here, you'll start releasing eggs, mature follicles, and you'll notice there's a splitting in chromosomal number. So you go from 46 to 23. And how does your body, or how does your that egg cell get rid of that extra DNA? Gets rid of it in a polar body. Polar body is like a little cell that's just got extra DNA. Your body reabsorbs it. It's not a big deal. It's just a way of getting rid of that DNA, okay? And then here's the really weird part, and I never got this, I think, till I started teaching this, that ladies, let's say you release an egg, so you're reducing it down to 23 chromosomes, but each one of those still has a sister chromatid with it. So it's really got like extra DNA in there. It doesn't undergo that second meiosis unless fertilization takes place. So you can see there the sperm enters the egg, and then it releases that sister chromatids separate, and it splits off that second polar body. Why it waits that long, I don't know. Maybe somebody can figure something out. Who knows? Maybe it's just thinking, you're probably not going to get fertilized anyway. We might as well wait before we split off. I'm sure there's some reasoning, but it's very interesting to me that it waits past that point to get rid of that second polar body, to get rid of that excess DNA. And like Katie said, it needs to remain large, so it's retaining all the cytoplasm and whatnot for fertilization. Okay? Any questions on oocyte formation? In your books, oogenesis or origin of the egg, you can see Part B, read that for us, Walker, under oogenesis.
It will be reactivated by FSH coming from the anterior pituitary at the start of the menstrual cycle.
Okay, so each week, we're talking about humans primarily here, where you have a menstrual cycle every 28 days or so. It starts over at the menstrual cycle. FSH is a hormone. What does it do? It's very descriptive. What?
It stimulates the follicle.
Yes, hence the name follicle stimulating hormone. It stimulates the follicle. What's found inside the follicle? The egg. Good. Remember in the video, it squished it out, kind of like a gusher squirting the inside of it out almost with a little egg coming out there. Now, the rest of the follicle is also important because it helps to regulate hormones in the second part of your cycle. So we'll get into that in a second. Okay? I feel like I'm the wrong person teaching this, but somebody's got to do it. All right, 1026. So there are a lot of charts on 1026, and they're all pretty much important from A all the way to E here. I will say this before we get started. I know y'all are all mature and smart, otherwise you wouldn't be taking this class. These are all sensitive topics. And so, ladies, I think it's important you know your bodies and how your bodies work. And guys, you're probably all going to be married one day, and it's important you know and halfway understand what's going on with your wife. And understand this. And you'll find out more and more, especially as you get toward like you're trying to have a kid. So these are things that are very important just to understand how our bodies function and how reproduction takes place. So, female hormonal pattern. Menstrual cycle occurs mainly in humans, usually 28 days long. Requires menstruation to release sugar-rich endometrium from the uterus if no pregnancy occurs. And we call that releasing of the endometrium the what? Your menses. Good, we'll get there. I never called it that. Whatever. Let's see. The female human menstrual cycle. Let's look at the picture at the bottom of 1026. So, Nathan, you can just pretend that this is the lining of the inside of your uterus or endometrium. Okay? Are you with me there? Read days 1 through 5 for us in the notes.
This is the menstrual flow phase. There is shedding of the old endometrium because pregnancy didn't occur.
Okay, so this is how your menstrual cycle is counted, Walker. Day 1 is the first day of what? What would we call that? Day 1 is the first day of your... What's the colloquial term? Period. Thank you. Ladies, y'all can feel free to chime in. These guys don't know what we're talking about. So, yes, the first day here. So, and you can see in the book here, it looks like day 0 through 5, your endometrium, they've got it like crumbling down a hill almost, like it's breaking down. That's the way it looks, the way they got the picture in the book. Okay? So, the lining on the inside of your uterus is shedding, like sloughing off and falling out. Okay? So, you didn't get pregnant, it's going to start over again. I mean, I don't know why you can't reuse it. Does anybody know? Maybe your body's just like, hey, didn't work that well this month. Maybe we need to try again, make it better the next time, you know? Like you build a building and it didn't work the one time. That doesn't make sense. Okay. Katie, days 5 through 13.
This is the proliferative phase. Estrogen causes endometrium to build back up. Fetal cushion.
Okay, so if you look on days 5 through 13 here, the proliferative phase. Now, what's the first part of proliferative? Pro-life. So it's promoting life there. So it's building up that endometrium in order for life to be able to have a sustainable habitat and grow and form in there. Okay. Estrogen. Now, if you look up on part D there, what's happening? Your book says estradiol, which is gosh, I get this wrong every time. Estradiol is a component of estrogen. Yes, sorry. We'll probably just say estrogen just for simplification purposes. So estrogen causes the new endometrium to be built back up. That lining inside the uterus is then built back up. Okay. You can see estradiol peaks in that period there between day 5 and 13. You see how it goes up there on part D? And so that's building up. What is it building up for? Good. Day 14, Tay.
It's usually the day of ovulation. It was the day first.
Okay, so it's preparing for the coming egg. So ovulation occurs, releasing of the egg. We're going to come back and talk more about the egg in a second and the follicle and how they relate and what their purpose is. But usually, now, do all women have 28-day cycles? No. Some may be 2 weeks. Some may be longer. Some may be highly irregular. You hear about these women on TV who like didn't know they were pregnant, and then they wound up having a baby. Usually, what happens is they have a very irregular cycle, and they got pregnant, and they didn't realize they were missing their period. And a lot of times, it's not always. A lot of times they're bigger, so they don't really notice a little bit of weight gain if there's a fluctuation that would come with a baby. And to be honest, I don't know how you can get to the point where your belly's moving that much and you don't know something's going on. Maybe you just think you have like a major upset stomach for 9 months, Matthew, who knows? But it can happen, so it can be highly irregular. What do women take a lot of times to regulate their cycle? Birth control. So a lot of times, yes, birth control hormones are used to regulate to make sure it's more of a regular cycle. Yeah, to go along with also trying to prevent pregnancy. So days 14 through 25, what happens there, Miranda?
This is the secretory phase. Progesterone causes the new endometrium to secrete a sugary substance. This sugar will serve to feed the developing fetus until an umbilical cord develops.
Yeah, that fetus, really at this point it's not a fetus, it's an embryo. Sorry, embryo. I got my shorts on the mind. So if fertilization takes place and it makes its way down toward the uterus, then that sugary, it's like, you being 3 days old, Matthew, and wandering into Candyland. What place would anyone rather be, as a small, undeveloped embryo? So you'll notice that the endometrium is getting bigger and bigger there on days 14 through 25, however they want to define it. Progesterone levels are increasing there for a large portion of that, helping in development of that. They spike quite a bit. And days 25 through 28. So let's say it didn't happen. Mason, what happens here?
You may read that.
25 through 28, yeah.
This is the endometrial breakdown phase. If no pregnancy has occurred, break down tissues for menses. When menses begins, that marks day one of a new cycle beginning.
All right, so basically what happens here at the end, like your body's like, nah, it's not going to happen this month. No implanted embryo, and so it kind of starts and gets ready for, you'll notice what happens to the hormones in the last few days there before menses begin. What happens to progesterone and estrogen? They go down like dramatically. So there's a dramatic change in hormones this last couple of days, and then that triggers the cycle to start all over again. And so like I said, day one is the first day of the new cycle. And that's also, consequently, when y'all get pregnant or have babies one day or go with someone who's having a baby. I didn't realize this till I went to the lady doctor with my wife when she got pregnant, that they start counting your pregnancy, like the 40 weeks of pregnancy is the normal time frame. Day one of that is the first day of when you started your last period. So that's how they start. When really, which I thought was really strange, I guess maybe it's for consistency. When really the baby isn't even conceived until a couple weeks later usually. Does that make sense? So they're starting counting from like that first day of your last period. Because usually once you start trying to have babies, that's something you keep up with, or if you're taking birth control or something like that, or you had been, you would probably keep up with that. And so that's like day one, and they go from there. So anyhow, ovarian cycle. So let's go through some of the hormones here in the release of this egg. Occurring at the same time as the menstrual cycle. So what are the ovaries doing? Part A, Mariah?
GnRH released by the hypothalamus travels to the anterior pituitary gland.
What do we say GnRH is? Gonadotropin releasing hormone. We talked about this in guys. So you'll notice at the very top of the page here on 1026, you got the hypothalamus. It's releasing GnRH. Gonadotropin releasing hormone controls the gonads. Good, very good. Dang, you are good. All right, travels to the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary are releasing two hormones that go to your ovaries. What are they? FSH and LH. FSH is follicle stimulating hormone. LH is luteinizing hormone. Both of these are helping to regulate the released follicle and egg. So the reason the note writer broke this up into two different parts is the first one there, the ovarian cycle, has to do with the release of the egg. So from the ovary and how it travels down and what's going on. The uterine cycle there, or menstrual cycle, Matthew, has to do with like the lining of the uterus. So both of these are happening concurrently, and they're, we could call them synergistic, but they're really two separate things there that are going on and controlled by different sets of hormones, okay? Even though they're kind of working together. So, read part B for us, Matthew.
The anterior pituitary gland releases FSH to travel to the ovary to stimulate several follicytes to begin to mature.
Okay. Follicle. What is inside the follicle? The egg. The follicular phase, day 1 through 13. The follicle and egg mature and releases estrogen. It travels to the uterus to stimulate proliferation of the endometrium in the uterus. So that follicle is helping to regulate what's going on where? In the uterus. Good. So it's kind of like, even before it's a baby, it's bossing people around, okay? It's bossing things around. Ovulation. Read down for us, Sarah.
The release of the egg to the fallopian tubes occurs. It travels toward the uterus and possible sperm.
Yeah, so you can see release typically on day 14. Like I said, this is going to vary quite a bit depending on your cycle. It's also going to vary depending on, usually they say the egg lives or can be fertilized for, I want to say up to 2 days, 24 hours, 2 days. And then sperm, I think they can stay alive in there for anywhere from 2 to 3 days. So you're talking about kind of a 5-day overlap there when things could take place. Typically though, around right after ovulation is when most people are going to get pregnant though. All right. Let's see, the luteal phase. Now this is important. So the follicle squirts that egg out, but the follicle is not done. The follicle has a very important purpose here. Read that for us, Walker.
Which one?
Luteal phase, days 15 through 28.
Corpus luteum, empty follicle.
Yeah, so corpus, think of like dead. This is your dead follicle. So it's already released the egg. It's still hanging out in there. It's got a purpose though. Keep going.
Produces progesterone and estrogen as it degrades. When the corpus luteum is gone, that causes the hypothalamus to detect no progesterone and releases GnRH to start the next cycle.
All right, hold up there. So this corpus luteum, this follicle that's still left, as it breaks down, it's releasing progesterone and estrogen as it breaks down and kind of keeping this secretory phase going in the latter part of the menstrual cycle. Once that corpus luteum is broken down and degenerated enough, then the hypothalamus, your brain's like, hey, there's no more progesterone. It's time to start back over. And so it will re-release gonadotropin releasing hormone to start the next cycle. Now, what do you not want to happen if you've just got pregnant, Katie? For you to start over. You got all that work, you finally got a fertilized egg, you got it in there, it's implanted, and you do not want to shed off the lining of your uterus and start over again. And the baby goes out with the, uterine lining. So, y'all know the story. So how does our bodies prevent that from happening? The fetus mimics a corpus luteum until HGH can take over to prevent the next cycle. So he's saying fetus. Really, you don't call it a fetus until it starts kind of looking like a human, maybe, gosh, what did they say? How many weeks? 10, 13, somewhere in there? 8? I can't remember. Anyway, early on, when it's just a ball of cells, usually we refer to it as an embryo, okay? So that embryo mimics the corpus luteum, secreting hormones, and then once that embryo gets big enough, it's going to start secreting HGH, which is human growth hormone. And once it does that, then that tells the brain, hey, we got a baby in here. And so I want to say, gosh, I can't remember. Y'all have to look it up. Birth control tests typically are looking for like trace amounts of hormones that are coming out. I can't remember which one it is exactly. And they use that to determine if you're pregnant or not. Some of them now are really good. Like you can tell before you've missed your next cycle that you're pregnant. So like pretty soon after conception takes place. So, but y'all have to look that up. I don't know if they all use the same one or detecting the same one, but that's what they're looking for. The hormones that are released there. All right, now that is how you get pregnant, when you get pregnant, or what happens if you don't. Menopause. No more GnRH is released from the hypothalamus. No more menstrual cycle. No more possible pregnancy. Usually occurs in the 40s. Maybe it can be in the 50s. But some women bypass menopause by doing what? No, you would still have menopause if your tubes are tied. That's only going to prevent pregnancy. Hysterectomy, where you have like your lady parts removed. Yeah, so you're gonna completely get rid of all those hormones and all the stuff that comes along with that. All right, now ladies, this is something you might have to deal with one day. 1027 at the bottom left. Read that for us, Matthew. You won't have to deal with this, so we'll let you read it. Bottom left at 1027, that last paragraph on the left side.
About 7% of women of reproductive age suffer from a disorder called endometriosis.
Okay, so endometriosis happens in about 1 in 15 women. So I figure in both of my bio classes, we got somebody who's got to deal with this. Keep going.
In which some cells of the uterine lining migrate to abdominal location that is abnormal, or ectopic.
Ectopic. We talked about ectopic pregnancies the other day, right? Where like the pregnancy develops like usually in the fallopian tubes. Keep going.
From Greek ectopics, having migrated to locations such as the oviduct, ovary, or large intestine, the ectopic issue responds to hormones in the bloodstream. Like the uterine endometrium, the ectopic tissue swells and breaks down during each ovarian cycle, resulting in pelvic pain and bleeding to the abdomen. Researchers have not yet determined why endometriosis occurs, but hormonal therapy or surgery can be used to lessen discomfort.
Yeah, that sounds horrible. And if you skip on to the next page there, or the next slide, it actually talks about after about 500 cycles, so we were close, depending on when you hit menopause and when you start, what's that called, menarche, your first period. And this says between 46 and 54. Ovaries lose their responsiveness to FSH and LH, resulting in a decline in estrogen production. Here's something interesting, like evolutionarily. Menopause is an unusual phenomenon. In most other species, females and males can reproduce throughout their entire life. I don't know that you find anything else that like stops reproducing when it gets older, like female humans. Never thought of that. One intriguing hypothesis proposes that during early human evolution, undergoing menopause after bearing several children allowed the mother to provide better care for her children and grandchildren, thereby increasing chances of survival of individuals who share her genetic makeup. So a possible explanation of why this happens and doesn't happen to really anything else, because we do live so long. And I never really thought about that for like, whales or sharks or elephants, stuff that lives things that can live really long lives too. I didn't think about them, still being able to continue to have babies even into very old age. All right, we need to move on. Part 5, organismal development. Oh, snap. Things fix get wild now. 10:15. You guys need to write down the term Parthenogenesis. So we've got 2 lizards. What are they doing there, Walker?
Having sex.
It does look like they're having sex, but in fact, they're not having sex because why? Well, at least not reproducing. Well, they're not having sex in the traditional term, I guess you would say. Both of those lizards are female. This type of lizard, the entire species is female. There are no males, Mason. Da-na-na. Mason, read 46:4 at the bottom for us.
46.4.
Figure at the bottom of the page. Get your life together.
Sexual behavior in parthenogenetic lizards. The desert grassland whip-tailed lizard is an all-female species. These reptiles reproduce by parthenogenesis, the development of an unfertilized egg, but ovulation is stimulated by mating behavior.
Interesting. So you've got their females. They have a cycle here that you see. What's the behavior that you see in that picture though in 10:15? What are the females doing? Yeah, it looks like they're wrestling. Good. They're going through mating behaviors. Are y'all okay today? It's okay to talk. I caught some video of 2 lizards mating this past summer. You know those little anno lizards, the ones that turn brown to green? You see around your house all the time? Like, they were outside on my porch, and the male was on top of the female. It has a little, neck extended, doing the dance of love. But anyway, that was a male and female, so that would have been sexual reproduction. These whiptail lizards, unfortunately, whatever works for you, would be working a little bit differently. Katie, start us at the top of 10:15 and explain this a little better, how you can be a female and still have babies without a male.
Nevertheless, these lizards have courtship and mating behaviors very similar to those of the sexual species of...
Nobody cares. Keep going.
During the breeding season, one...
No, okay, so those are the lizards that are similar to these whiptail lizards. So there's another species that is very similar, and they have very similar courtship and mating behaviors, even though they're all female. Keep going.
During the breeding season, one female of each mating pair mimics a male. Members of the pair alternate roles 2 or 3 times during the season. An individual adopts female behavior when the level of the hormone estradiol is high, and it switches to a male-like behavior when the level of hormone progesterone is high. A female is more likely to ovulate if she is mounted at a critical time of the hormone cycle. Isolated lizards lay fewer eggs than those who go through the motions of sex. These findings support the hypothesis that these parthenogenetic lizards evolved from species having 2 sexes and still require certain sexual stimuli for maximum reproductive success.
Boom! Whose mind's blown, right, Sarah? So the hypothesis is that they still need this going through the motions of sorts in order to help with reproduction, even though they really, aren't getting fertilized by a male. They still need the motions of it in order to, stimulate that reproduction to happen.
But they don't need it all to reproduce?
Well, it says they're more likely to if they have that, but they don't have to. I don't know how often it is if they're on their own. It said, what did it say? Not. It just said the other ones don't lay as many, so it definitely helps out. Anyway, all right. DNA genes, the process of development through production of proteins and enzymes. Cytoplasmic determinants. These act as signals within cells that control mitosis. So remember, we all start out as what? little zygote, one cell. We start dividing, right? So we were all one cell. Now we're like 50 to 100 trillion cells. That's a big difference, okay? So what helps us get to where we're going in the position that we're in? Turn to page 1058. Actually, turn to 1041 first. So on 1041, you can kind of see us going from this fertilized egg to 4 to 16, 4 to 8 to 16, and so forth. So it starts dividing, getting bigger and bigger, more and more cells. All right, you kind of see it a little bit more on 1042. Now flip over to 1058. So on 1058, oh yeah, I know what this is about. We have a bunch of genes that control the pattern of the organism that develops, like so the human pattern, you see it where, you know, we're very unique because we stand upright, we've got our brain on top, the spinal cord comes out the bottom and goes straight down. Most animals have what other type of pattern? How does their brain do? Like, think of a dog. Their brain is here, and then their spinal cord comes straight out the back along their... So you see how they're kind of in a linear fashion, whereas we're a brain on top, and then the spinal goes down from there. So you have these genes that control where everything develops, these pattern genes. We'll talk more about this when we get to genetics, okay? But it forms the basic patterns of animals. To go along with that, we have positional genes. There's a number of genes called, I think they're Hox genes, H-O-X. Miranda, read that for us.
The pattern gene?
No, positional.
Positional genes control the position and location of various structures such as organs, bones, and muscles. Where is the heart located in humans, the small intestine, the brain, and the spinal cord?
Okay, so I found an interesting developmental issue where things can kind of switch place. Let's see here. Flip over. It's on the 1058, that picture. Situs Inversus, the reversal of normal left to right asymmetry in the chest and abdomen. So looking at someone, we're very symmetrical, right? Left side, right side, everything looks the same. But if you cut somebody open, or really any kind of animal open, you'll notice that there's an asymmetry. Usually your liver and stuff are over here more on the right side. Your stomach's more on the left, along with your spleen, okay? And so your heart kind of, it's in the middle, but it curves over to the left a little bit, so it always appears more to the left, especially if you're listening to someone, that and the blood pumps out this side. And so this is a developmental issue where basically you have kind of this inverted development that takes place, which I think is really weird. I just read about this the other day. The most intriguing feature of Parthenogenesis syndrome is Situs Inversus, the reversal of normal left to right asymmetry of the organs in the chest and abdomen. The heart bites, for example, is more on the right side than on the left. It causes no significant medical problems, though. So like your appendix would be over here on the left side instead of the right side. I think that's interesting. Anyway.
I think they've ever had surgery where they like remove someone's appendix and they just went like come open and it was like in the wrong place.
I don't know. I'd like to know how often that occurs, like in the population. I'm sure it probably happened maybe once or twice, but you know, appendicitis is pretty rare anyway. So
Imagine it's your first ever surgery and the organs.
you're looking for it, and like I cannot find the appendix.
And you're like, supervisor's over here, like, yeah, you can.
He's like right there. I mean, I can see it dangling down right there on the guy. You can see it on the. You see the normal location. So on his right side at the bottom, you can see it kind of dangling down. That's the appendix. But on the other side, it's dangling down on the that person's left side. So yeah, I can imagine going in. Well, normally it normally hurts. You hear somebody hurting right there on their low right abdomen. They're like, oh, you might have an appendicitis. You need to get that checked out because it can kill you. But I mean, imagine it's on the left side and be like, no, there's no way that's an appendicitis. Oh wait, his was on the wrong side and we let him die. So anyway, turn to page 229 and we'll quit here for the day. 229. Questioning me, Katie? Webbed feet. I know I muddle my words together. I'll try to articulate better for you and my wife. That'll make you happy. 229. All right, so I don't know why this frog has green feet, right? No, they've got some kind of fluorescence, and actually it's a mouse here. So we've talked about apoptosis, programmed cell death, or programmed cell suicide. We talked about it in immunity. It's how our digits form between our fingers. You can see starting out here with webbing, and then those cells undergoing apoptosis or programmed cell death to form the fingers, the toes. We also said it's used in us to do what? Get rid of a hamster.
Cancer.
Sometimes in cancer. What else?
Sick cells.
Yeah, in the immune process. What else? It was in the video the other day. Or I thought we talked about it in the video.
Oh, whenever the baby's developing and like the digits start forming in the hands and limbs.
I just said hands and limbs. Which other one?
The tail.
Tail. There you go. So I would make sure you're familiar with those. So it helps in the formation of organisms just by killing those cells off, which is pretty interesting. I guess I would have pictured it like your fingers are dividing and spreading out from different points, but it's formed as padding, and then cells are dying to form that. Anyway, we'll continue on to fertilization and actually how the embryo develops tomorrow, which is pretty in depth. That's all we have time for today.